That's a funny looking Webley. It was supposed to be a Michaela outing, but it was scuppered by another Duff Uasa battery that only lasted around a year and 2 weeks. After waiting for the AA, we dug out our reserve, which is Webley Mark II. It was 1:30 in the afternoon before we dug out our reserve for the day, and a slight change of plan for our first letter. We kept it fairly local. Just about 100 yards before our first location of the day, we found that Webley's front tyre had suddenly gone down to almost flat. We managed to make it home, and it was found to have about 10 psi in the front tyre. Nothing found in the tyre, so I changed the valve. So, third time lucky, and hopefully, as well as this X5, another X1 in the making. Unfortunately, it was so late in the day now, there was no chance of doing it in video format. It's just a short, roughly 3-mile ride to our altered first location, to save a bit of time, of Hagley, Worcestershire. Hagley is in North Worcestershire. It's about as North Worcestershire as you can get, really. It is situated not far from the Clent Hills and Hagley Hall, which is the home of the 12th Viscount Cobham and the present-day Littleton family. For 3 years, from 1969 to 1972, Hagley was the home of Led Zeppelin drummer John Bonham. On a sad note, motorbike engineer Doug Heel died in Hagley in 2001 and is buried a few miles away. Our next port of call is Ullanall in Warwickshire. Not that far away, but the letter U in relation to a place name is very difficult to come across without travelling quite a distance from the Midlands. Ullanall is situated between Redditch and Henley in Arden. The name means Ulla's Nook, the Old English word hal, H-A-H-L, meaning nook or corner of land. The village is the home of the slowest pint drinker in history. A slight deviation from the challenge was a visit back to a certain Royal Enfield parts supplier to take back these Ferodo brake pads. I'd cleaned the discs before I even started to put the new ones in. No issues. You can see the sort of pitting and scoring in the pads. There was no issues with the discs, no contamination. To start with, there was horrendous vibration through the front brake lever. Squealing, which was the worst squealing I've ever heard on any of my bikes, or even cars for that matter. In the end, after 75 miles, I gave up and I put some EBC pads in, sintered ones, and they're fine. Ferodo eventually got back and said they'd never seen anything like it on these, suggested that there was some contamination, some perhaps grit, I suppose, or something like that on the discs or on the pads. There wasn't. But whilst I was there, I took the opportunity to buy a new front inner tube for Webley, considering what had happened a few years earlier. My original first R location escapes my memory now, but as I was so close to Rowington, I went there instead. The small village is 6 miles northwest of Warwick on the B4439. The Heart of England Way, a 99-mile walk through the Midlands from Milford Common near Stafford to Bourton-on-the-Water in the Cotswolds, Gloucestershire, passes through the village. The most notable building in the village is the Church of St Lawrence, the central tower of which was built circa 1330. But the village was once known for several windmills. Now only one remains and the sails have been removed as it is now a house. Our second R of the outing, Redditch in Worcestershire. There's probably one thing that Redditch is known for than anything else, but since the Bronze Age up to fairly recent times, needles were manufactured in the area. Of course, there were other industries, fish hooks, fishing tackle, springs, and of course Royal Enfield. This wall is all that remains of the original Royal Enfield factory, which is near the Crab's Cross area of the town. Talking of all that remains, this is just about all that remains of the main factory that most people may have heard of in Hewell Road. This building formed part of the canteen and was built in 1950. I'm sure there's folks that think that this building was part of the Royal Enfield factory, what with the bullet monument and the plaque on the building itself, behind Webley's pannier more or less. It never was. The company tried to buy it, but the owner at the time never wanted to sell. You can see the new units behind. They've been there about 5-6 years. Sadly, I missed getting there before they knocked the original buildings down. Did you know that the letter V is the least used letter, first letter that is, of any place name in England, according to the internet, closely followed by I. Without travelling, 175 miles, I stumbled across Izmir, which is not far from Kidderminster. And whilst most of the locations visited for this part of the challenge had at least a modicum of historical interest about them, Izmir has a pub. It also has a very small garden centre and the Beast of Izmir. A few miles from Izmir, and even closer to Kidderminster, is Cuckley, which lies on the River Stour. The medieval name of Cuckley was Culnan Cliff, and was situated on the opposite side of the River Stour to the present-day village. As well as the River Stour, the Staffordshire and Worcestershire Canal runs nearby. Cuckley had a slitting mill in around 1639. In the 1670s, a finery forge, water-powered, was added. It was developed over the years, but finally closed in the 1880s. Trying to keep things as local as possible for this trip, especially now that I'm running well into the evening, I initially went to Arley on the River Severn, again not far from Kidderminster. Alas, if you like, the West Midlands side of Arley is Upper Arley, so I couldn't use that for the A. So I went all the way into Bewdley and up the other side to the railway station side to see if there was a sign there. Nothing at all. It was then a case of dig the phone out, Google Maps and start looking. And I come up with Aberley, which is on the northern slopes of Aberley Hill, between the rivers Severn and Teme, halfway between Worcester and Tenbury Wells in Worcestershire. In 1086, Aberley was known as Edbalderledge. Through various changes in the name since that time, it became Aberley with one B in 1480. Before that, in 1405, Aberley Hill was the centre of a standoff between the army of Henry IV, which was camped on the hill, and the primarily Welsh army of Owain Glyndŵr, camped on the nearby Woodbury Hill, in what is sometimes known as the Last War of Independence, or more commonly, the Welsh Revolt. Cut off from their supply line, the Welsh withdrew, never again to penetrate so far into England. The next one required a bit of backtracking. Newnham Bridge is situated on the junction of the A443 and A456, with the River Ree running along the A456 in the area. This is the Talbot Inn, and I can't ever recall it being open, not that I travel this way that often. Certainly it hasn't been open since COVID. Just a few minutes' ride from Newnham Bridge is Eastham. Eastham is a tiny village, but it does have a rather interesting Norman church, which is Grade 1 listed. I'd started this journey on Michaela at about 11 AM. By the time I'd got to the church at Eastham, it was about 8 PM. Apart from the frustrations earlier in the day, the weather was great and it was a lovely day out. We also managed to bag another X1 ride of 75 miles or more.